Marty's got such broad shoulders.
Matthew must be spreading out more.
Yeah, we got 2:30.
Oh, wait.
So, get my mic going. Going to start off update on tax report with Dennis Butler.
Okay, once I get here, they'll have it up on the screen, but for now, you got all a copy of the red and green sheet. And what we're starting with here, we're starting with what we currently have levied for tax rates. We're 726 and we're 951 for the rural, which includes the countywide. That was a 15-cent reduction for this last current fiscal year from the previous year, and an 86-cent reduction, basically because of the bridge project going on. That's just to give you an idea. Now, go to page 2, you'll see where we start at. We start at $7.57 per thousand for countywide, and $10.01 for the rural unincorporated. That includes the countywide plus rural basic. So we're starting out with 31 cents more than our current year on countywide and 50 cents more on the rural unincorporated. Last week we made some adjustments, and that is we reduced our countywide by 5 cents, and that reduced the rural unincorporated by 5 cents. So we're still 26 cents over and 45 cents over. On the next page, this will be a running total showing where we made the cuts. You can see in Department of Human Services we had a revenue increase. Well, you see our starting position up here, 2.4 million broke down into 5 funds. Then you can see each week how we go along, how we're decreasing. So last week in general basic, we actually decreased our tax asking by 44,000, general sup by 70,000, county services by 93,000, for a total of 207,000. So we're down to 2,233,000 over the current year, and that kind of keeps the running total there. And then I think I did include this page here, which shows you tax askings, tax rates and tax askings. I'll update that every week so you can see as we progress how we're going down. Notice I didn't say up, down. So that kind of gives you a recap where we're at, and then we can go ahead and start. Any questions? Very good.
All right, so now let's move on to budget review discussion for FY 2020. We're starting off with supervisors, soil conservation. It's page 50 through 53.
Hello. My name is Ben Holker. I'm with the Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm a watershed technician. I'm just here today to encourage the Board of Supervisors to continue their support of this position. And we're requesting $39,000 for this position as well. I'm sure you're familiar with the watershed technician position, but I do have a little handout in case you kind of want to know, has a little overview of what I do, if you guys are interested. Just pass this out.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Pass those down.
Maybe one for the, I don't know if the auditor needs.
So this is just kind of an overview of kind of my duties as a watershed technician. I perform inspections and maintenance of the watershed structures that were funded through the Little Sioux Flood Prevention Project. These structures provide flood prevention for Woodbury County roads, several communities within Woodbury County, and thousands of acres of property and farmland. We just had a National Watershed Benefits model released that estimated there was $600,000 worth of prevented flood damage in Woodbury County just after one rainfall event that took place on August 20th. Something to kind of put in perspective is that rainfall amount only averaged about 3 inches in our county. So that number, $600,000, is quite interesting as far as it goes as prevented flood damage. This is just to kind of keep in mind, the sponsors for these structures include the Woodbury County Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as the Board of Supervisors. The agreements between the sponsors are recorded easements and operation maintenance agreements. The rest of the bullet points are just kind of a summary of what I've been doing this past year. I've been employed since last January. My main goal was to inspect all of these watersheds and create a list of sites that needed more maintenance than others. And as of today, I've completed 355 inspections out of about 460 total structures in the county. And I've currently created a list with 28 sites listed that need more maintenance than others. These are due to things like shoreline erosion, overuse of livestock, and some concrete deterioration. I've also accomplished about 100 hours of maintenance activities, which include things like removing trees, unplugging inlets. I also communicate all these issues with the Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as NRCS engineer and staff. And I've also communicated with the Woodbury County Engineer on a few of these issues, just looking for suggestions on solutions to some of these problems. I also keep in close contact with the landowners that these structures are on. Hold meetings with them and contractors to discuss repairs and costs. And I also report to some of the issues that some of the landowners discuss with me. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what I do, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Does the Soil and Conservation District not have enough levying authority for their own
Well,
funding?
as far as I know, is that this position has always been funded through the
county?
Board of Supervisors.
Right.
So that's, I do have a commissioner and our district conservationist here if they have any other knowledge.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for what you do. I'm always fascinated by these positions like this that have technical expertise and have to do with land quality and erosion and things I know not enough about. But you said approximately 100 hours of maintenance activities have been completed, unplugging inlets and so on.
Correct.
How do you get that accomplished? Is that something that you're contracting or that you're contacting the county engineer, or how does that work?
Kind of a combination of everything. I try and do as much of it by hand as possible. Some of the bigger issues I do contract out to, if you need bigger equipment to remove dams, plugged inlets, things like that.
And you have that within your budget to be able to
Yeah.
do? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
We have in the past, and I have planned on currently being paid out of rural basic as an allocation quarterly, but we also fund it through local option sales tax. We've done that for several years now.
The last several years through
Yes.
local option sales tax?
Yes.
As a way to mitigate property taxes?
Yes.
Do you have it in the budget under local option sales
Yes.
tax right now?
Yes.
And where is that in our books?
That is on
53?
page 231, I'll show you here. Let me grab it real quick here. It is under page, getting closer. Page 61,
Under supervisors?
yes. I believe that's it. Well, I don't see it, but it should be there.
That's what I was going to tell you. I don't see it either.
I know, okay, I know where it's at. I got to think about this a little bit. It's under transfers. Go to page 58.
I'm sure we'll find you somewhere.
Well, we're under 60, so let's try 60. It caught me by surprise here a little bit. That's no problem. It's under page 60, and you'll see transfers out to the Economic Development Department. And you'll see soil conservation, 39,000. So it's actually transfer out to replenish the rural basic fund to offset tax askings. Took me a minute, but I got it.
What was the request last year?
36,000,
So it's an increase of 3.
3,000, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And that is basically probably the cost of living adjustment or something of that nature?
Yes, and there's been a NIPERS change, just a little bit of a change, not much. In the past, we did fund when they were hired this, I believe this gentleman here, that we did pay 78,000 one year, but that's for the full wage plus half the wage to get him acclimated with the process he had to do. Since then, we've cut it back to just him, because the other, I think it's Dick Cuny, was a former, I believe.
Who was that?
Who was a former?
Louis Byers.
Louis Byers, yes. So he helped get him acclimated, we agreed to help him do that, but that's been reduced now back to 39, which is his cost.
I'd move the 39,000 out of local option sales tax.
Are you just moving to receive it, though? Or,
Yeah, moving to receive and designating the funding mechanism.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
That was Ung, sorry. Motion by Taylor, second by Ung. All right, move on to item number 2, Township Officers Rural Basic there, page 54.
Okay, on this one, we increased it $1,000. You can see the history back to last year was 8,000. This year it's only 2,500, but they do not turn in their claims for their meetings, and the clerk gets paid so much an hour, so that can vary a little bit. That they usually come in probably April, May. That's when they turn in their claims. So 8,000 should cover it. Last year was 8,300. The year before was 5,600, but it all depends how much these clerks do, how much they turn in for time. And I believe, Pat, if I'm right, then the board set the hourly rate or daily rate for hourly for the clerk and daily for meetings. So that's why I went up 1,000. And this is tax supported, but we're required to pay them. It's kind of an odd deal because I don't understand sometimes why the township doesn't get their own wages. It comes through the board. I think the board appoints the township trustees.
And why is it going up, Don?
Because last year we spent 8,300, almost 8,400. The year before was 5,600. So we increased it to 8,000. Make sure we did have enough money this year.
So those actuals up there, this is 7663 versus I see where it says 8362.
Yeah.
But you see where, oh, those are all added. Okay, gotcha. Sorry. Okay.
I'll move it to receive. Motion by Raddick, second by Young. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Moving on to conservation. First item, administration, general basic, page 3 through 6.
Their big ticket item in this, besides wages, are motor vehicle expenses, and they have that on a program where they replace them every year, so many years, all that. We used to pay it out of equipment replacement, but we told everybody to pay for those equipment out of their budgets. This happened about 2, 3, 4 years ago. So it's the same dollar amount.
What page is that on?
That on page 5. They're at the bottom. And they have a breakdown of what they're buying on the next page.
You have a different page 5 than me?
Actually, page 6 on the top is where the breakdown is.
Yeah.
It starts on page 5.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah, last year you put the 100,000 back into our budget for us to get back on track with our equipment replacement. And we appreciate that and hope that that will move forward because we've got a $10,000 maintenance line item and we're already at $9,800 this year and we're coming into our busy season come March. So some of that equipment needs to move on down the road.
Mr. Chair. 4020, Dan, on page 4.
Okay.
The typing, printing, binding. Is that something that you do maybe annually? I see there's nothing expended this year so
That's a
far.
sprint.
And
That's a one-time 40/20, let me get there. That's for our camping receipts and for the campground receipts that they self-register with. And we usually print those in the spring. You're looking at the $1,500 line item?
right. And it looked like you spent about 520 last year.
Well, we went into the season, I didn't let them order, and we were nip and tuck.
Okay.
But I wanted to use up what we had. So we are sitting with nothing on the shelf. We normally go in with 1,000 or 2,000 envelopes on the shelf.
Okay. So you think you anticipate spending 1,500?
Yeah, we're going to print and reprint those.
Okay. Thank you.
While you're looking at that, my board does look at this pretty hard, and we went through and we were looking at some of the years past, a year or two, and where our expenses were, and you helped us out last year by our electrical and our water getting caught up to where they're supposed to be. And so we looked at just the increases in the general basic part of our budget, which is tax axing, was just over 2.03%. So we looked at $8,800 basically is what our increase is total. Trying to keep it as lean as we can, but still try and have enough money to operate and do what we want to do.
Are you saying overall or non-staff?
This is all general basic funds, tax dollars, was $8,800 increase.
Okay, just go back to page 3. You notice on a wage employee part-time, there's $13,711 that was there this year. This year we did use, I believe, either gaming or local op sales tax to fund that part-time position 1 year. So this has caused an increase, this overall increase of this department here by $13,000.
Why would we only have done that 1 year?
Because I believe that's what the board said they do. We can look at it every year, but when it's going to be a full-time, part-time position,
It's got to come out of operating.
budget not use local option or gaming. Because he's probably going to keep it, we have to tax out general basic fund. It's a little different. Soil conservation, that's a position you don't have to fund. And I guess you don't have to fund, but they need the help.
Yes.
Yes. They need, it's a little.
But I guess my question is, if we can fund it and we can utilize another source of revenue rather than general basic taxation, isn't that an option of the board?
It's an option. But let me check, see where we paid it from, because we don't have a whole lot of money left of gaming revenues. If we do, we kind of do it this year with local option.
Yeah, local option is what I'd be thinking
I
about.
think it was. But I think it's 15,000. So you only have 115,000 left over. We do everything that I did not include the 15 here. So if you do it, you're down about 99,000. It's unencumbered for next year. That doesn't leave you a whole lot of money. Because in a year, and even, we got 5 more months this year, things could come up.
I'd like to note that, just to keep that on. I'm not saying do it right now, but that may be a potential for us. The local option sales tax, I'm not saying.
Review it, I need to write things down as we go along here to bring back at our second to last final meeting before we actually publish a budget, to look at this, see where we're at, and see if we need to do it or don't need to do it to accomplish our end goal.
Well, I think at the end of the day, anything's available to be reviewed at the end. We're just reviewing everything as is, so.
You can change everything, because you aren't approving until you have your public hearing, then you're locked.
And I get how much you want your $100,000 for vehicles and stuff, but, that can be cut down a little bit too, that's something I'd revisit potentially is something rather than looking at staff maybe, myself. Not saying to zero, but could be
And
reduced.
Conservation kind of different, even though without general basic, they have their own board. They set their budget. We're making somewhat like an allocation to it. I think any cuts we'd have to do would have to go through his board also. So we say, we want to cut like 10,000 out. He has to go back to the board and say, where do we want to cut this 10,000 out? Otherwise, why do we have a conservation board?
True, okay.
And that's what they would do. They would go through that budget and make those recommendations and hope that you would follow through and say, okay, we'll cut them from here. If that's what it's going to take.
Sure.
But you can give them suggestions where you'd like to see them cut.
Are they advisory or are they,
Policy setting by law.
okay.
Yep.
Last one for me, anyway, on this division, 6360, office equipment and furniture.
Which page?
Sorry, page 6.
I did get a copy of what we have here, so it's pages.
That's been very helpful.
So it didn't look like we spent anything this year, didn't spend anything last year. Do we anticipate desks, file cabinets, chairs, and that?
Oh, on the $2,000 line item?
Right.
With our, we're looking at right now with the, if you need, you should come out and visit our office. Offices are now in the classroom, but the redo with the new part-time clerk, and we'll be looking at a new desk for our office manager where you come in, and her desk is being repurposed for our part-time clerk into that lower office. And with all the carpet and everything that's going on out there and the painting, there's some things that were popping up that we weren't expecting. So
Okay.
I hope that 2,000 should take care of the chair, the desks that we need. So that's why I left that in there this year.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
I'm just trying to look in that crystal ball, and if we don't spend it, it's coming back to you anyway. So.
Sure.
Any other questions on administration?
I'd move to receive.
Second. Okay. I'll go motion by Taylor, second by Young. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Let's move on to the parks budget on page 7 through 10.
I want to point out before we start, if you start looking at percent spent, it's going to be misleading because we'll start, as you know, we're seasonal. You'll have, March through June, you'll see 60% of our budget get spent easily, depending on the weather. And then, you won't be at that 50%, if you're looking at the 50% expended as of January 1st, that's kind of misleading when you start looking at fuels, staff, and chemicals, things that we do. So I just want to point that out. Our next 4 busiest months are going to be coming up, so we'll spend a good share of our budget.
The big item in this budget is on page 7. There's this improvement request. I have listed what they are. They generally ask for this every year. Hopes to get it, but they anticipate they won't get it. So if Dan wants to speak more to this issue or not, these are 2 new employees.
And this comes from the long-range planning, and we have our long-range planning coming up in February as a conservation board, where they look at staffing, services we provide that affect the quality of life, and as the conservation board does. And that is one thing that they have pointed out. We're missing that resource tech down at Southwood. The other 2 districts have that resource tech. And we've got Don Haar and Eric Lindsay down there. And then it's just the rest of it's part-time. So that resource position is important to us to help spread out the workload. They've got the biggest area when it comes to wildlife areas and food plots. And those areas get a lot of use, especially this time of year through the hunting seasons. And then, of course, their campground during the summer. And we got the horseback riders that ride down there and camp down there as well, and they volunteer their time to help. So that position has been identified by the Conservation Board and staff through several years of long-range planning. And so that's one of the positions. The other is a GIS resource tech. They'd be doing 2 jobs. But when we do our, say we have a prescribed burn to do, we have to have burn plans. We have to have maps that show what's been burned, the wind direction, and that person can help do that planning. That's just the tip of the iceberg that they can do. But just trying to, let's say this new piece that we bought with secondary roads, that GIS person can sit down and start mapping that out, working with the engineer, so we know when they're done reclaiming that it's the way we want it, so we can just go in and have that footprint ready for a park. And that's what's that GIS position, that's one of the other jobs they could do. But year-round, it'd be split duties. They'd be out doing work, but then they'd also be able to help us with our GIS and planning on maps showing whether it's tree plantings, prairie plantings, burns, park improvements, and that's what that position is. And that's been identified by the Conservation Board as a position they would like as well. The other one they had identified was that part-time clerk, and you took care of that for us last year. And that has worked out really well for us. I want you to know that we appreciate that. And that's why those two are in there.
So on the supervisory, you dropped about 58,000. Your wage plan employees went up 82. Was there a shift of titles or retirement or change in there?
Well, when Rick Schneider retired, salaries went down.
That would have been under administrative.
That would have been under administration. I don't see where you're at, Keith. Can you help me out?
Page 7.
So, yeah, page 7, 1,009 supervisory went from 189 last year to 130,866.
We had done, I think there had been a budget amendment. That was part of the amendment last year, and we ended up giving close to 25,000. Whatever we amended for, that went back. There's a lot of amendments that Rick and I had worked through thinking that were going to happen. That's the only way I can, because it was supposed to be, it was less than that. I wish I had my last year's budget. But the original budget was not 189. It was less than that. That had the amendment, and Rick had, there was funds that they had carried over from the fiscal year before and had an agreement with you, and I think that with that amendment that was in there. But I think there was close to $25,000 that went back.
If you add the two line items together, 189, 234 comes to 223 or 423. If you add the other two for the new year, comes to 446. Yeah, I figure there could be step increase there, also a percent raise. So it's really, when you add the two together, it comes out pretty close.
That's right. That's on. Okay, I was.
There's one up and one down.
Yep.
You're talking about supervisory and wage plan together?
Yes.
Yes.
If you add the two together, we're real close when you consider step increases and.
Thank you. I forgot about the step increases and the cost of living increases.
There's a big jump when you go 17, 18, and then, you know, there's the shift of 19 more to supervisory and less to wage plan. And then now it's shifted back the other way.
I'm going back to the budget that I inputted. There's a lot of information here that's throwing me off. See, we don't even get to enter those.
Okay.
My board doesn't get to deal with those. All we work on is my board doesn't even.
Designate staff or.
Well, they have, but they don't have control of that. Other than the wage plan, the auditor's office and the supervisors set the cost of living increase. So they look at the wage plan every year, and then when it's time for us to, in May, they'll certify that wage plan because the supervisors have approved that. So that's automatic. Last year it was automatic. You know, I'm a year in, I'm learning this, but that wage plan, my board approved that in May. We had forms that are sent out. Right, Michelle?
Michelle,
May or June that you sent that out?
can you shed any light on this, Michelle?
I don't know if it's, I mean, we wouldn't have approved $82,000 wage increase.
I can get the book and check to see where the difference is. We do the payroll budgeting in our office, in the auditor's office, and we send the positions out to Dan in probably September or October. They review it to make sure all the positions are accurate, and they advise if there's step raises and so forth. And then generally we just put in the wage percent that's designated by Dennis in coordination with the chair, and that's what produces the wages.
See, this is what he's looking at right here. We got 17 was 97, 18 it went to 181. We spent 154, we're at 189.
Actually, what you spend in fiscal year 18 is 400,000. So when you go from 18 to 19, it just represents the increases. She can go back and look and see why 1009 went from 97,000 to 184. That's really a question mark.
That was last year,
That'd be 17.
17, 18.
From 17 fiscal year to 18, there's that increase. From 18 to 19.
Here, sorry.
Well, that's where you're looking right here.
Yeah.
These are the
I can tell you
actuals
one reason it
from
went up
last
too,
year.
because you had a payout probably for Rick Snyder, where you had a lot of vacation payout.
That'd have been under administrative, but you
Yeah.
had Bernie Kettleson,
Oh, okay.
and
Oh, yeah.
you had 3 retirements of long-term employees. You had Bernie Kettleson.
So maybe that's
Mark
why,
Mayfield, Bill Anderson. So there was 3 of them.
maybe that's why you have a shift from supervisory went down.
It did, because in the wage plan, they'll start on the lower end of the scale when Josh was hired, when Bob was hired to be the resource manager to replace him, they start at the bottom end of the wage plan. That could have been it. So,
And these individuals could accumulate up to 4 or 5 weeks, depending where they're at. So when you had 5 weeks times 3 is 15 weeks times their wages. It's a pretty good chunk of money.
I understand where you come from now, Keith. Until I started going back and forth and seeing that we were back in 17, and I understand where you'd have that question, so. Yeah, that would have been burning. 40 years.
If we went back to administration, you notice where on the department head, we had a payout of 130,018. This year it's about 99,000. So, when he retired, there's a pretty good chunk of payout. That's why you see these big fluctuations. Here we're talking about 3 people. Not at Rick's wages, but wages, they're pretty big.
I guess when it comes to wages, the auditor's office does do the wage plan budgeting, so there wouldn't be anything unless there was a mistake made. But we can check on that, but otherwise, the auditor's office does the salaries for that. So I'm just saying is that unless you're looking for a mistake, there's probably not much you can do about that line.
You don't make mistakes.
No, our office might.
No, I mean, you don't.
We don't.
Dennis, what's 26 cents on the dollar as far as the levy rate translate to,
26 cents on the dollar.
roughly?
I can tell you what 1 penny equals 44,000.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you want to equate it back to this improvement, you're talking about 3 cents per thousand. If you don't improve, it'll be a reduction.
And that's my difficulty with approving that request. Not that I don't see the necessity for it.
You mean for the 2 new positions?
Right. So if we've got 1,144,000 roughly that we're trying to close, that's kind of the push and pull, just not that we otherwise wouldn't want to. So that's just where I'm at personally. Yeah.
Well, I understand, and it's a need we have, and if we don't keep coming to you, and someday we hope that things change, and I understand.
Appreciate it.
So move to receive minus the improvement requests.
Second.
I do have one question, if I can. Sure. The Southwood conservation person, would that have any effect on your income down in that area, your revenue?
If we added that person? Probably not. Not at this time, because
It's not a revenue-generating position.
It's what?
It's not a revenue-generating position?
No, it would be out working in the parks,
Okay.
in the campgrounds, and yes, it is, because every acre is worth $400 income to the economy. I could spew all kinds of numbers for you from tourism of the land that the hunters bring in for economy into the county. But to be honest, yeah, they'd be out working just like the other guys. So I could not tell you in good faith that, yeah, that's going to bring more money.
Okay.
So, any other questions? Motion by Radig, second by Taylor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to 3 naturalists. That's page 11 through 14.
Did you say 11 to 14?
That's what it says in the
Okay,
notes.
all right.
11 is just some income.
That's a donation we get every year from the Los Hills Audubon Society, and then they pay for advertising in our newsletter at $225.
So I could put $1,000 in there, but I have zero right now. I didn't know what it was for sure.
You could, because we could foresee other donations coming in. Dawn Schneider, our E-Director, is in charge of that and does an excellent job going out and looking for donations. In fact, I got a call the other day that a lady passed away, and that I know there's 2,000 coming in, and I don't know if they're going to bequeath it to the Conservation Board or to the foundation, so that would cover your 1,000. So, but the lawyer called me and told me that that's sitting out there, so.
3,000 would be nice, but
Yeah.
I don't know where the other two is going, so one's safe.
Yeah.
Don't make up too many numbers now.
So then you get in there operating on page 12.
We did this decrease one of our line items in the budget, as you'll know, under Nature Center, and I hope to foresee that going down further. And that was line item 4140, the telephone on the Nature Center. With this move and WIC encouraging us to move over to the county system and getting off the phone company, the contract wasn't renegotiated. That went up about $480 a month until we saw that and now we switched over to the county, and I'm hoping that we can foresee some more savings, and with the internet, and when all that shakes out, I hope that next year we can cut this even more.
What budget was that in?
That's in the Nature Center budget? Is that the one we're on?
No, we're on the
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was looking for it, I couldn't find it.
It's all on the same sheet for me on mine. But any questions on the naturalist budget?
How many employees are under the naturalist position?
I've got 3 full-time. I got Dawn, Teresa, Tyler. And we'll run 6 to, last year we were 7 interns. And I had some information I want to give you. I don't expect you to look at it now, but I knew when we got to the Nature Center part of it, you would want to see the number of children and public groups that the naturalists reach and what goes to the Nature Center. And I have a sheet here with a pie chart on it. You're looking at over 55,000 that we touch in the county. And then it breaks down the number of groups, 510 groups that the naturalists have seen, and then the number of volunteer hours, and then we start keeping track of all the programs we have to turn down because we don't have that naturalist position that we're hoping to come to you with. And we've already turned away 2,500 people because we couldn't do those programs.
Did they ever utilize the mileage? I see it hasn't been utilized the last 3 years, it looks like.
Well, there should have been one last year because I'm a stickler on that. We still have incidents when we don't have vehicles. Like right now, one of the naturalist vehicles is at another class that one of the park staffs took it to. So if we have 2 programs going and they've got to use their vehicle now, there will be mileage. But there should have been an expense last year because I cut it in half and paid for half the mileage. I want to look at that, why it isn't in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just looking, it looks like mileage, travel expenses.
Well, travel expenses that could be motel rooms and meals.
Yeah, I just see it hasn't been used the last 3 years, but we're budgeting for.
Well, I think what's been happening is some of that's been coming out of my administration side. I want to keep a closer look at that and get that. There's not as many line items that I would like, and I know the auditor's office doesn't want to see a bajillion of them in my budget. I'd like to see a little more accounting of how much is used. So we're working what we got, but we have to fine tune, and when those bills come in, that it comes out of administration of the naturalist side, not administration of my side of the budget.
Right.
I think that's where some of that's been coming. I see that. I think Can't promise you, but I can look into it. I think that's why that hasn't been utilized a lot, because I know they go to classes. I know they go to the IAN, the naturalist workshops. It's got to be coming from somewhere.
But what, add some, Dennis?
Yeah, when you go back to the administration side, he does have district schools, workshops, staff training. He went from 3,500 to 4,000. So if you take 3,500 plus the 400 here, it's 3,900. Increase to 4,000, so you got 4,000 plus 4, you got 4,400.
I just don't want to be, and I'm not trying to nickel and dime it. I don't want to be double budgeting. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's $1,000 in this, if it's accounted for elsewhere, you know?
I understand.
And it could be, possibly. You'll have to go back and look.
Could you look at that, Dan, a little bit? And we'll just come back to it sometime.
And try, yeah, I can try and, I still have some questions on, this is a different budgeting system than I'm used to, so I've had a year of it, and I'm getting better, so.
Sure.
To make it clear, though, we should have, if he's got travel in a certain division, we don't care if we add the line, but we need to add the line item and use the line item. And, you know, instead of taking, say if you had 6 departments for all of administration, I think you want it broke out by department, so you know how much that department is costing. And this just might be a coding thing, it's been coding to administration, it should be coded here, that I don't know. But we can add line item, that's not a problem.
Yeah, we didn't,
I
you
know.
just said something about not allowed in line item. We don't care.
Okay, well, some previous employers didn't want a lot of line items, but they'd have to create them. But I'd like to know how much, when I have if I've got that travel budget or I've got that school budget, I want to know that my 8 peace officers cost me this much. My 3 naturalists cost me this much when they go to those schools. Because if you just look at a lump sum, it's hard for me to justify to you that I need that. It's just like we are now with this $1,000. So that's something I can work with Dennis and Pat and try and maybe get
No,
that.
we agree.
Okay.
We like to see the line items so that everybody can see exactly what they're doing.
You know, and this is basically Rick's budget outline, and we're using, and, you know, it can be changed.
Sounds good. So that might be one we can come back to later. If you want to write that down, Dennis.
Yep.
And if it's not accounted for elsewhere and it needs to be in here, that's fine. But if you find that it is coming out of administration, then we don't need a budget for it here, or vice versa.
Yeah, and he mentioned something about training park officers. I just looked at the park budget. There is no travel, or there is no training expense like travel expense to go to training. I think it's being all lumped in as administration.
It's all in administration.
And that probably needs to be broke out separate, which reduces administration, but spread
Right.
out the right departments. I think
I
that's
thought-
what you're kind of referring to.
Yep.
Dan just liked to travel.
Right.
No. No, I think.
I don't agree if you don't hear it, Dennis.
Yeah. Rick had it all under one, and that was the way he did it, and that's the way he tracked it, and he knew it. Me being new, I want to know how much is coming out for my law enforcement under parks, and that's a good point, Dennis. You know, Rick kept it all under administration. I do things a little differently. I would like to break that out and try and do that. So
We will work with you.
So
We
any,
can readjust that. You can come back to me and I can readjust it. And then we'll have a grand total broke down by department on travel.
any other questions on the naturalist?
Move to receive.
Plus the 1,000 on revenue?
Yes.
Second.
We increase revenue $1,000, which is a tax asking decrease. That's on the donations that he's guaranteed. Next year might be 3,000. Well, it won't. 1,000.
So motion is second to receive plus 1,000 in the revenue. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to the Nature Center, line item 4, that is page 15 through 18.
that first page, page 15, would be your some of your nature center rentals that come in at. Looks like we have 2,500. Year to date, it's 1,240. That's revenue from people renting classrooms and kitchen area.
So this is where the phone bill went down.
In this section, yes. I don't know, they're, you know, we could probably cut that more, but I don't know, looking what it's gonna cost me. I'd rather have 6 months under my belt on this new system to make sure that I have no charge. So we had to keep 2 phone lines for fax. We had to keep 2 regular phone lines. And I don't know if that's for sure it's gonna cost me when all the dust settles. So we have to have one for our fire alarm and security system. We had to have a separate one for our elevator, so if somebody gets trapped in the elevator. So that's just pick a figure and cut it, and that's what I did. And we'll have a better snapshot by looking at it next year, or in 6 months. I just wanted to bring that up, that not all of our items are increasing. We actually did look at increase. The other increase there was the electricity went up $1,000. If you look back last year, we spent $12,148. The year before, we spent $11,068. I'd rather not deficit spend it. If we can budget the $12,000, that's why I increased it $1,000.
Did you add a cell phone plan for somebody?
Where are you at on
The
that?
naturalist, that went up by $400.
In the past, Teresa Crude, our full-time naturalist, was only getting cell phone reimbursement for 4 months.
Oh,
And that kind of got looked over in the past. Well, she's with kids 12 months out of the year. And with the things that go on in today's world and with safety of the kids, if somebody's injured, I went to the board and I wanted to have her get a year plan at that $50 a month. So that's that increase, Keith. There's 8 months at $400. 8 months at $50, which equals a $400. So she's getting a full year reimbursement for use of her phone, because I expect her to carry it and I expect her to be able to get a hold of her. So that's.
I'd move to receive.
Second.
so motion by Taylor, second by Potabom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Passes 5-0. Moving on to REAP, non-tax funded, pages 19 to 20.
Yeah, the next two, they put their park user fees in it. The Conservation Reserve REAP is actually grant, I believe.
REAP is actually from the state, from gambling dollars, and we get it through per capita and per allocation. So that, right now, it's been 26.5. It depends on what the legislature does with that. If it's 12 million or 10 million or 15 million, and so that figure always varies. We put in, hoping that they'll maintain at 12 million, and then we'd get our 26,500. That comes from their gambling dollars. It's the Resource Enhancement and Protection Fund, and that's where that 26.5 comes from the state. And then the next one is the REAP budget. We just put 100,000 there. That can be used for educational purposes, land acquisition. There's certain things you can spend REAP dollars on, and it's spelled out in the code. But we put a $100,000 line item in there, thinking that if we needed to do match money for the Breezy property, which we purchased with you guys last year, which we're still going after grant dollars. We missed it by one this fall, and we're going to try again this summer with the grant. But if we need match dollars to take on another grant, that's a possible area. So we want to have the spending authority under there. But it doesn't affect tax dollars. The REAP fund is already sitting there. It's the state dollars we get.
It just allows you to spend up until that amount?
Yes.
That's budgeted. So what makes us anticipate that those REAP dollars are going to go down for next year? I mean, it's the 35,000
The state took
average.
$2 million. The state appropriated $12 million, and then they reallocated $2 million to the state parks fund and something else with the DNR. So there's $10 million. So REAP I get into this long thing, but we don't have time. But REAP sunsets 2020. So we got a year. And then these payments could go away unless the legislature takes the sunset and says REAP will sunset in 2030. Or 19, instead of 2020, it'll be 2030. And then they would use these gambling dollars and make that appropriation. So depending, if they appropriated the full 30 million like REAP law was when it came out, then this figure would go up. That 26.5 would go up. It would be a per capita, and it comes off the tax formula. So
But you're anticipating getting less than the last year and less than the last 3-year average?
Probably.
Okay.
I'm hoping not, that's why we kept it at the 26, but, you know how it goes down the capital. It's like you guys, they have to make hard decisions and reallocate money somewhere, so.
That's
But I would
different.
ask you to talk to your legislators and encourage them to, if you looked at the benefit that REAP has had for the city of Sioux City, the Parks Department, the county conservation, soil and water conservation, everything that REAP does, it's been modeled. Other states have tried to model it. So encourage them to look at keeping REAP alive when you talk to your legislators, because it'll help us.
A lot of people voting on it weren't anywhere around when REAP started, so.
And there's REAP grants available that come around once a year that we can go after. And this year there's only $800,000 available because that's been being cut. So
I'll move to receive it.
Second.
Is that DeWitt?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to Conservation Reserve, non-tax fund 21 through 27.
this is where a lot of our user fees go into from campgrounds and cabins. And then we're able to do a lot of our CIP projects that the Conservation Board's doing out in the parks. So we don't have to come to you and ask for a lot of capital improvements. So.
On page 23, you can see some of the capital improvements we're proposing on land acquisition and buildings. The board agreed to do this quite a few years ago, where the park money used to go in general basic, but the board agreed, along with conservation, the law allows it, to take that money and put it in a separate fund under the control of the Conservation Board. Right.
Yep, the 1981 tax law allowed that, finance law allowed that to happen. And so you would have, your previous board would have done a resolution to allow that. And that's where we sit down, and there again, while we'll have our long-range planning coming up next month, the board will sit down, look at all the things that we have on the table that need to be done. That's why we put that road improvement in front of you, which I know we're not talking about today, but you'll see that as we get into that in a week or two. But there's things that we really can't bite off ourselves, but there's projects like this in here that we can, and that's where that money's going for.
Yeah, and our CIP, which we'll tackle down the road here, they do have 475,000 requests for roads in
The road down Little Sioux Park.
Little Sioux Park, yes.
And I know Rick's talked to you about that before, and they did a slurry leveling here a year ago, and Secondary Roads has told us that's going to give us, it's a Band-Aid, it's not going to give us a lot of time before we lose the road, and we're going to have to address that, and that's why I put that back in front of you. But like I said, we can talk about that in a couple of weeks, and I'll meet with the engineer and get some more information for you. That's one of those projects I inherited, so I haven't learned, I need to do some homework on it and learn about it.
Possibility of may try to pattern that program, that road like we did out there at the Nature Center, where we spread it over 10 years, and then they reimburse us from the Conservation Reserve so much money a year to spread it over 10 years. That road is, by the way, paid off this year.
Yeah, June will be our 10 of 10.
That's the end of it. So it might be a good time maybe to think about another one through Conservation Reserve or tax dollars, I'm sure where the board wants to go, but that's 4 or 5 weeks away.
So on these buildings, though, the 475,000, that is mostly paid through your revenues,
Yes.
and then the remaining would be subsidized through property tax, or
Nope.
not?
No, we go after grants and try and find match money, donations, and that's why it's been nice that you guys have allowed that. We're not coming to you and asking for those dollars. And you look at that, it's been averaging $375,000, $400,000 a year they've been putting into capital improvements, and finding and using that as leverage money and with grants and other donations that we haven't had to come to you and ask for infrastructure needs. And it's been very beneficial.
So what's the overall effect on taxes with this division? Then
0.
I'd move it.
Second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick to receive conservation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on.
Jeez.
Run before they get more.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you, appreciate it, and if you have any questions, I'm always available, and Marty's comes to our board, and so he can bring things to us if you need to as well. So thank you for your time, and hope I didn't keep you too long.
Thanks, Dan.
Moving on to the auditor, the recorder's office, general basic, page 3 through 8. Yeah, I do. Okay. What'd you do?
So Diane is off on medical leave today, so I'll be answering.
Page 3 and 4 is just the revenue coming in. And that stays pretty much the same every year.
Receive.
Second. Okay. Motion by Ung, second by Potabom to receive the recorders. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to the auditor, general basic, page 9 through 12.
Michelle, that is you.
Michelle Scaff, Deputy Auditor. Pretty small budget that we have in my portion of the office. I did manage to decrease the operating budget by a small amount. One significant thing that you should know is that we spoke with Verizon, so any county purchased cell phone, the cost has went down by about $10 for a smartphone, so we're paying $42 a month for a smartphone for a county employee if they have the need for that. So you'll be seeing a reduction in any employee that would have a smartphone,
Countywide.
countywide.
Michelle, on 4201, is that, at the risk of going the wrong direction, is that no longer a budgeted need? I noticed we spent some money in that, or the
Is that
professional services. Yeah.
We covered some of the expenses for the contractor for the Tyler project. Out of the last budget, we had not budgeted for that. We
Okay.
had some extra expenses that we spent. Now it's coming out of the CIP budget for the Tyler project.
Gotcha, thank you. I'd move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Ung to receive. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Elections General Supplemental Administration, page 13 through 16.
Steve is out sick today, so you must have been scared of you folks.
You give all your your three deputies off?
So I'll be answering any questions.
Postage and mailing, Pat, is that pretty steady on page 14? I didn't know if that's kind of an end of the year thing. I know we have a little bit there, and then the 10,915
Yeah, that
before.
comes,
Is that because of the election coming up?
Yeah, but what it does is the meter makes a payment to it, and you run the meter down to a certain point, and then you dump in a bunch of money, is what it boils down to.
Okay. That's a pretty good estimation of what the rate will be. Okay. And again, I know a small amount, but 4210, the computer software, just looks like we hadn't spent anything the last 2 or 3 years on that, or?
Yeah. Puts it in there, and you can remove it if you want.
Is that all right?
Big deal, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any issue on the equipment maintenance, or is that something that's used, or, and maybe that just pops up sometimes, but it looks like we spent $46 the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's just on equipment, calculators and that type of thing. That you have to pop that up.
Do you think we should keep that like that,
Yeah,
just in case?
yep.
Okay.
Pat, on page 13,
Okay.
what caused the city general and school elections to go down from FY18? Does that have anything to do with it?
Oh, that's revenue, and we'll get to that because we'll look at those budgets, but this is the first year we're going to do a combination, and it's really a crapshoot. We don't know
Okay.
what's going to occur. We just reduced, because we're supposed to have theoretically savings because you're combining those two budgets. So that's why the revenue went down.
Okay.
Actually, the revenue's up. And HT, they show revenues as minuses, expenses pluses. So actually, these are all increases for next year because they offset the election itself. They're kind of wash in and out, about 99% of it.
Well,
Because you got city
are
primary.
you on page 13 or what page are you on?
Page 13, that's your revenue.
Right. Well, city primary wouldn't change, but there's a reduction in the school election, right? From 39,000 to 24,000.
Okay, from the previous year.
In city general, right.
All I took there was just actual expenditure and plugged that in.
Oh, right. And that's why it's showing the same thing.
Right.
Because,
For a wash.
because the budgets are going to be reduced for each one of those. So that's why the revenue is reflected as a reduction.
So if they spend it, we get reimbursed. If they don't spend it, say they're in the city primary, which I don't know when that's ever happened, they wouldn't spend it, but we wouldn't get the revenue.
Okay.
Actually, 4 years ago was the first time that we didn't have a
Really?
city primary because of the mayor and one council position up.
Yep.
But it is a wash if it doesn't occur because your revenue is offset.
General primary is tax supported. The other next three, school, city primary, city general, are non-tax. They're taxed by their certain bodies, but not us.
It's taxed, it's just somebody else's tax.
Somebody else's pocket.
And we're still on administration.
We're on, oh yeah, we didn't move administration yet. Is there any other questions on administration?
I'd move to receive my less $250 on 3210.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? And that was a motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt, sorry.
DeWitt,
That
okay.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Moving on to general primary election, page 17 through 18. No big changes there. I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Move on to school elections, page 19 through 20.
We haven't been able to spend a lot of time on that. We just relaxed it. I think we reduced both of those by about 40% or something like that.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, passes 5-0. Move on to city general, page 21 through 22. Also shows the similar reduction. I'll go ahead and move to receive it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to city primary. That is on page 23 through 24.
And this too is just offset by revenue, right, Dennis?
Yes.
I'd move to receive.
Second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. All those in favor to receive, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right. Moving on to Records Management Non-Tax Fund, page 25 through 26.
This Dennis just puts in as whatever we have in the fund, gives us the authority to spend it.
Spending this fund is at the direction of the county auditor recorder. There's specific things he can spend it on, but he knows what those are.
We don't get to know?
You can.
You'll know when you get the plan.
It's anything that has to do, mostly what we use it is to repair books in the back, and then every once in a while, if we go backwards to update the records and make them digital, we spend that money on that type of thing.
So on like page 26, just so I'm understanding, where you have the $220,000, is that, how is that?
That is, go ahead.
That is accounting for $14,800 on page 25, new revenue coming in, plus the cash balance, as we estimate it'll be June 30th. That way it gives him total authority to spend without coming back for a budget amendment if he spends it. If he doesn't spend it, it just stays there, carries over to fund to the next year.
What we used it for previously, it was a few years ago, we spent a big hunk of it to a project to go in the records that are just in, that are written, handwritten books. We go back and digitize those so that folks that are doing the research can do it online. They don't have to come into the office to look for those things. And that's what we're looking for. I asked Diane to look at that again.
So basically your revenues roll into that fund every year?
Right.
Okay, I'll move to receive that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor to receive, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to Recorders Electronic Fees, Non-Tax Fund, page 27.
This is just carryover funds. There is no new fees going into it each year. So fees have been kind of done away with. It's just money there that he could spend, gives him authority to go ahead and spend it.
I think,
Budget amendment.
yeah, there should be an actual amount because we spent something this year to buy a new plotter in the back. So I don't know why it's not in the action, but he just found, she just made that purchase.
All right, no questions? All right, I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to Emergency Services. General Supplemental, pages 3 through 8.
I'm Gary Brown, Director of Woodbury County Emergency Services.
Page 3, again, is just revenue coming in that he generates out there. And then 4 starts as expenses. Included in this one is improvement request totaling $19,839. There's a breakdown of what it is: quarter part-time operations officer, includes wages and IPERS, salary upgrade, and benefits. So we got broke down there, but that's added in there.
Does that include the alarm system, Dennis, or is that capital improvements?
No, that'd be CIP.
Okay. We have been able to, the last 6 months since we brought all the paramedics on staff, our goal was 95% of the times a patient needed a paramedic, that we would be able to put one in the back of the volunteers' ambulances. And we, according to our statistics, we feel pretty confident that we're making that number. And we've had, and I'm not going to take the credit for it, my department's not going to take the credit, but we've had several saves working together with the volunteers over the last 6 months that are kind of stand out. So, but it's not just us that's doing it. It's a team effort, including Mercy Air Care and the hospitals and everybody. But we've had some really dramatic good calls that have turned out well.
Gary, on 8505, the miscellaneous, on the accounting for revenue, you haven't had any this year. Is that something you anticipate having come back, or is that different than the tiered ALS?
That's all in the tiered ALS now.
So is that, do we anticipate getting that?
Yes, we're definitely on track for that revenue.
Okay, for the 1,500.
15,000.
Well, you've got one.
Oh, miscellaneous.
Right.
That comes from, the 500 comes from animal control, or the 1,500 comes from animal control. There's some that comes in from building permits where we go out and do the addressing.
Okay.
And then there's some miscellaneous revenue that we get a rebate back from the telco that our phone service is through. So that 1,500 is.
So you anticipate getting that? Okay.
Yeah. And that 1,500 is, we get our telco, our phone company's a co-op, so we get a dividend back every year. Then we generate a little bit of money from animal control and a little bit of money from doing the addressing. If you get a building permit issued, it comes out to us, and then my staff goes out and installs the rural addressing physical sign. The 911 service board pays for the material, and then we get paid by the homeowner, the person requesting the address, a fee to go out and install the sign, and they just work that into their day. But we're definitely on track for the paramedic revenue. Matter of fact, I think we might even exceed that a little bit. We're watching it real close. So it's like all revenue. Some of it came from last year into this year because we didn't get paid prior to the 1st of July, and some of what we do won't be paid until after the 1st of July. But based on where we are today, I'm confident. And that's coming from when we provide an advanced life support service to the patient. We bill the voluntary ambulance service $200 for that, and then they're able to add that to their ambulance bill. Okay. And our policy always before has been, if they collect all 200, we get all 200. If they get nothing, then we don't run them in the hole for that call, but our collections are doing very well.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I want to be pretty honest and upfront on this. I don't think I'm going to be supporting the improvement requests here this year. I just don't see where we have the budget for it.
Well, if I could just explain, there's two. One is to take our clerk 2 to a clerk 3. And when we compared her to other positions around the county, let me back up. When she first started with us, she came in as a clerk 2, as a second person in the office, dealing primarily with grants, managing grants. And when the person who was our regular clerk resigned, the grant process, we moved her into that regular clerk position from the grants, and then she did both jobs for quite a while. Matter of fact, still does both jobs on some of the grants. We compared her to positions within the sheriff's office, zoning, secondary roads. I've got the list, county treasurers, HR. When we look at the job duties that she has and comparing those to the other clerk 3s in the county, we felt that this position should be looked at to be moved from a clerk 2 to a clerk 3. The other improvement request that we have in is to, last year, if you remember when we were working on the paramedic issue, we asked for a total of 3 full-time paramedics and 1 3/4-time paramedic. And we backed off of that, with your help, to go to a quarter-time paramedic because these new employees wouldn't generate any vacation or sick leave in that first year. They wouldn't start to build much, but they can't use their vacation in the first year, and they start to build sick leave. But the way our schedule works, there are, in order to keep from paying an outrageous amount of overtime, we have to get them off of the shift depending on where they fall in the schedule, because we work a 28-day cycle and they work up to 212 hours. So to stay at that 95% coverage, we've been good this year. If we want to stay there next year, then I'm going to need a little bit more help. And then rather than to ask again this year for a 3/4-time paramedic, our staff, we talked about it. We think there's an opportunity to take some of the senior paramedics that are in the county that are looking to go part-time and bring them on board without the healthcare benefits, without all the other benefits. So our goal is to be able to maybe get to the point where we have 3/4-time paramedics doing the extra coverage and save on the healthcare benefits and the extra benefits of a full-time employee. That's our strategy right now.
because we see this crop of paramedics that's starting to look towards retirement. I've got one on my staff now. We're having a serious conversation. He's going to go here in the next year, and he may want to stay on part-time. We may have a full-timer and a part-timer, just trade places, but the goal would be to save that $18,000, $20,000 a year in healthcare benefits if we could do it with quarter-time employees. Once we hit 24 hours or 30 hours, is it that we have to pay benefits? 29. So that's the crux behind the 2 improvement requests. And I really feel on the clerical position that she's got 15 years in with us. This position should have probably, in my opinion, based on what I see in these other clerk 3s, probably should have been a clerk 3 all along. You're talking about 70, how much was it, Denny? $7,600, $7,800?
$7,363.
Right. And then the part-time paramedic is $15,000, roughly?
$11,218 with benefits. For $1,939. I put it as two different improvements, like 2 in conservation, consolidated into 1. So you improve all of it, one of them, or none of them.
You know, if we don't do the paramedic position, we're going to fall from that 95% coverage. And that's a goal that I think is worthy to attain and to keep.
I don't disagree. The difficulty is that, you know, like what we were telling Dan, was it 1,144,000? 26 cents, something like that. So that's what we're trying to.
I fully follow what you're trying to do, and my charge is to bring forward to you what it takes, what I feel is the right thing to do for my department, and and I feel both of these improvement requests make sense. And well, on the paramedic side, we'll keep us in that 95%, and on the clerk 2 position, I believe that with the work that she does, and especially now with us, she's also kind of our compliance officer to make sure that we are up to speed with all the state laws and well, not just the laws, but she does the paperwork, I do the laws, but we work together to make sure that we're licensed, because we're a service that's licensed with the Department of Public Health, Bureau of EMS, and they regularly inspect us and can penalize us, shut us down.
Any other questions or comments here? Anyone want to put forth a motion on it? Or?
I'll move to receive.
I'll second that, but again, I think this is something that can come back at wrap-up, because I don't know that there's going to be 3 votes for the improvement request when it comes time for the actual budget. So, all those in favor to receive as it is right now? Oh, it was motion by Potabom, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Moving on to animal control, which is on pages 9 through 10.
For each budget status quo budget, I will put my hat off to an organization locally called Noah's Hope, to Sioux City Humane Society or Siouxland Humane Society, and the City of Sioux City's Animal Rescue and Adoption League. It's our numbers are in check because of the cooperation that's going on between those 3 organizations to make the world a better place for our four-legged friends. And I really appreciate, we've seen a marked decrease in the number of animals that we're having to manage. We do get great cooperation from the Sheriff's Department when we're having to deal with neglected and abused animals. We've got a pretty good team approach there. and we get really good cooperation from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources Conservation Officers on wildlife. So, because people live out there, they call one number for everything. So,
Move it.
yeah.
Move to receive it.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Potabom. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. EMS Loan Fund, that's page 11 and 12.
This is a program that was started years ago by the previous boards to make available money to loan out to the voluntary ambulance services for the replacement of equipment. Ambulances, pagers, jaws of life, that kind of thing. It's a revolving loan fund. We can loan it up to 5 years at 0 interest. Currently, that fund is setting at $159,472. We expect one payment to come in the budget year that we're talking about. So the authorized spending in that line item needs to be $169,472, and that's just a revolving fund. The money comes in, the money goes out. So those loans come before the board for final approval.
No impact on tax.
Done.
Move it.
Second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Moving on to number 4, EMA training, non-tax fund, which would be pages 13 and 14.
And that really should be EMS training. And that line item, even though we're budgeting some money in there, right now that looks like that grant's going to be administered again next year by the Iowa Department of Public Health, but it's money in, money out, not taxed.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Moving on to emergency paramedic services, general basic 15 and 16.
It's pretty much just a status quo budget. Other than personnel increase on the 1st of July, we've not changed anything at all on that budget.
There's a jump in overtime where there wasn't before. Was that?
If you look in my regular budget, it shows up as overtime, but what it really is premium pay for holidays. And I believe this year the auditor's office is working on showing that in a different line item that's not overtime, it's premium pay. We were asked earlier in the budget process that if we needed to adjust our overtime numbers to get that information to the auditor's office, which we did, and you'll see that there is a $4,700 or $4,500 request for that holiday pay. We do everything we can to control the overtime. Our employees don't get overtime unless they're at 80 hours of comp time and go over, and we work real hard to keep them under that 80 hours of comp time. Occasionally we do have a little bit of overtime, but it's very minimal. But that I should have said that budget does include that $4,500, and that's the premium pay they get paid for the employees working the holiday. You have the same situation in the sheriff's office, juvenile detention. I don't know about conservation, but it always shows up at overtime, and to me, it's premium pay for holidays. We're not bringing them in to work extra.
80 hours is the max that can accumulate on.
80 hours of comp time is the max, and then we start paying overtime after that. So that's what those part-time employees, when those guys start inching up that comp time, then we have to back them out and get them off the shift. They're required to be down to 40 hours. I think it's by June 10th. Otherwise, we pay them anything over 40 hours. And very rarely have we paid anything over 40 hours. I won't say never, but it would be a very rare occasion for that to happen.
Just so the board's aware of it, because we ran a situation with our department 2-3 years ago, that this budget now, as it stands now, is going to need a budget amendment probably up to $4,500 or $5,000. And we're going to have to find out where the money's coming from.
And can I
budget just for the wages, benefits, and we did not budget for holiday pay or overtime pay. We just budgeted what their wages were.
Our revenue is running ahead of expectations for the paramedic calls, and I feel comfortable with the $5,000 will be there in extra revenue that's not budgeted for to compensate for that overtime.
Okay, that brings up the next question. Should the emergency calls be deposited in general SUP, that's where they're going currently, or should they deposit in the paramedic fund? We're talking about $20,000. If you move it to the paramedic fund, which is being funded through tax dollars in general basic and rural basic. That reduced their levies in general rural basic, but it increased the general sub. So I guess we gotta make a decision, where do we want this revenue going? Because right now, it's not going in this fund. So this fund will be short. So everybody understands this. 20,000 is going into general supplemental under his budget. Do we want to move 10,000 of that or 5,000 of that from his budget revenue over to this budget? And that would occur this year, which then we would have the money to fund the holiday pay or any overtime, which he didn't have much.
Is that what your recommendation would be?
Yes. It's going to be if it's 4,500, it's going to be 4,500 somewhere. Because if we take it away from general sub, we're just going to have to increase taxes there, 4,500. So we're just shifting it from a avoided tax increase in general basic and rural basic. So it's not a total wash because you have to come up with a overtime and holiday pay somewhere.
Dennis, we've done the numbers on what we anticipate premium pay will be. I think I have them with me, but I can get them to you on both sides of the house, both on the emergency services and on the paramedic budgets. We've actually went employee by employee with holidays, and we've got that calculated now. And that 4,700 or 4,500, I think, comes pretty close to covering it.
But Dennis,
that's additional expenses we don't have this year.
but to me, common sense, but if his department's bringing in the revenue and we're putting it somewhere else, that's him, but you're short, so we have to find something to cover it. Doesn't make sense to me.
It's going to be a
I know.
potential tax increase any way you go.
Either way.
It's just which funds are coming out. And we can move 5,000 revenue over to the paramedics to cover this. We still have to do a budget amendment to cover the appropriation. But that's 5,000 less than general sub for next year, which we'll have tax for there.
Or tax for
Either
here.
way, it's $5,000 increase any way you want to look at it.
And we anticipate on the emergency services side 5,000, and on the paramedic budget 4,500 for premium holiday pay. And like I said, I'm very comfortable in saying there's $5,000 worth of extra revenue coming in on these emergency calls. We anticipated 15, and we're there already. So,
but it really is an extra for next year. It's going to be an increase because it wasn't budgeted this year.
It's one of those different things, so you don't budget for holiday or premium pay or whatever you want to call it, because most departments, they don't work on holidays. Then you have the couple of departments where, yeah, they do. I have the same problem in my other
I
job.
guess the choice, do you want to work on holidays or not having paramedic service on holidays, and we don't have to worry about 5,000?
Well, unfortunately, emergencies don't take a holiday off.
They don't take the holidays either.
I think Christmas was one of the busiest days we had this year.
So what do we need to go ahead and make a decision on right now? Is there anything that you believe is going to be material to the taxpayer, whether it's general sup or general basic? Nobody cares. At the end of the day, they care if they're right.
Yes. 5,000 needs to come probably from this current year of revenue in general sup, which would be emergency calls, moved into this fund so it doesn't run out of money. Then we'll do a budget amendment for the current year. The next year, instead of 20,000 budgeted there, we'll split it to 15,000, 5,000 to paramedics.
But Dennis, right now, we're on the paramedic services budget.
Out of general basic, yeah.
They're on, yeah. So are you recommending that they change anything or just receive the budget as submitted?
Well, we're changing the revenue, 20,000, rolling all into general supplemental fund to 15,000 general sup, 5,000 paramedic fund.
Can you do that later, or, because we're just talking about this budget right now.
Right.
Whether we're going to receive this budget.
Right.
I'll just move to receive it here as is.
Second.
So motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to WCICC.
But then you're going to, at some point, you're going to
Have to do a budget.
do whatever we've been talking about.
15,000 one fund, 5,000 the other.
Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, just for a point, can we maybe have some of these things that we're saying, okay, write that down,
Yep, I've got stuff being written down.
typed out, and then at the end say, we need to look at the emergency service improvement requests,
Yes.
doing that division transfer, just so we don't lose all of that on.
Well, that's
What-
more of a regular
part of the wrap-up, where we get down to final, see
Right.
where we're at, where do we need to go, what more do we need to cut, or find new revenue.
I'm just saying if it could be, that way it doesn't go through Dennis's wash and then we don't know what we said.
Right, no, it's not going through no wash.
All right.
My epoxy is cleaned out quick, so then it'll crumble.
If there's any additional information that any of the board members want or need to discuss about the improvement request, just please get a hold of me. I'll provide whatever you need or sit down and visit with you about it, so. All done?
We're good. Yeah, moving on to WCICC. Which is that? Somewhere in here.
John Malloy, WCICC-IT. In the name of time and in your efforts, sir, I'm willing to dispense with the conversation and you just receive it. Move along.
What a guy.
Yeah, thank you.
That's big of you, John.
Appreciate that. This year's budget compared to last year's budget, you see a noted increase.
What's it under?
Must be under Supervisors.
Supervisors, page 16 is the budget, then the following pages are a breakdown.
So page 16 through 26 under Supervisors.
And we tried to get a budget earlier, but we couldn't get it before this was printed, so I took exactly what he had, which includes his improvement requests that have not been approved yet. So potentially they'll either stay the same, or the worst case scenario, it'll go down, or the best case.
Depends which perspective you have.
How's that the worst?
Yeah. Again, I believe there were, as I've presented to the WIC Commission, there was a half a dozen improvements in on that budget. The most significant was a cybersecurity analyst position that I promoted. There were other two position adjustments, a request for standby pay for my team of people. Again, emergencies don't take a break either in IT. Those are the big hitters as far as my budget goes. Software maintenance typically increases in that 5% range every year. Sometimes it's 10%. We budgeted 5% for both entities. And that, again, I believe that amounts to $11,000 or $12,000 of that increase as well.
The improvement requests are page 20 through 26.
It's the overall increase of the budget.
What it currently is, it's
113.
114,000.
Yep, and again, those include all the improvement requests.
So he's had some downs because the improvement requests are actually more because, for example, you go to page 21, that's that tech he's asking for is 113,000, but you gotta remember we only pay a certain percent of that.
That's what I was going to ask. How
That's
many
why
half
the
of it?
requests add up more, but city shares part of it, I think, what do we pay, 43, 44%?
44.45% will be the 2020 or 2020
That's
rate.
why there's a difference between his request of 1,179,000 and what he's currently getting at 1,065,000. It's only 114. That includes all their pay increases, plus all these requests at 43%.
I would be stunned if all the improvements came through. Okay.
So
I'm hopeful that some of the improvements come through.
what's the amount of the total improvement requests on their own?
I believe for the improvements that you see in front of you, the grand total is 193,347. But again, the county share of that is less than half.
And if there was an order of priority or prioritization of those improvement requests?
My improvement requests, again, we've had some discussion with the WIC Commission. The position improvements are important to me. This standby pay is important to me. Cybersecurity analyst is important for the organization. There's also a disaster recovery as a service. Again, what that would do is keep a copy of our production data at a remote facility. We have data here, we have data at TSI, and if for some ungodly moment that would happen in a catastrophic event at either or both sites, we'd have a production copy of data somewhere else. Again, it's an insurance policy. I presented all these to the WIC Commission and to the city manager. So
Were the improvement requests recommended by the WIC Commission?
I believe there was a lot of discussion. The position improvements were yeah, they were accepted. I believe they were accepted by the commission as a whole. There was discussion regarding the standby pay, the ability to do that. A large portion of my staff now is union, and they're talking about being able to adjust a union contract in midterm. So there's some unknown about that. The priority of the cybersecurity analyst, I don't know if I got consensus on that. There was just a lot of discussion. So again, I perceive these as needs, and I presented those to the city manager, and if he agrees or doesn't agree, and again, we're constrained by the budgets as well. So, but yes, the position improvements, to answer the question, were my number one, and the standby pay, that is just a huge issue for my team as far as a morale perspective. Getting called at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, or 7 a.m. at night, or whatever the situation may be, or we get a security operations center warning from the state office saying we have a compromised system, we have to respond to that. So, and currently my staff does not get, we provide compensation time, but as far as compensation, there's not compensation for that.
Is that a what-if kind of deal too, or are you expecting that amount of time, 23,400 worth in a year?
Right, that would be repeatable. Yeah, recurring is that.
Well, like, are you expecting that, or
Yes.
guaranteed that, or it's?
That's the amount I proposed, or that's the method I proposed. Again, threw something out there as an example that I would provide for my primary on-call person, my secondary on-call person, to have some kind of stipend. I believe I did the calculations it's like $1.40 an hour or something like that to provide on-call coverage. Comments from Marty or?
Mr. Director, on other entities on, say, our size, what would be, how many of these IT cybersecurity analysts would they have on staff? Would they have 1, 2, 3, or is there any comparables with that?
I would have to research that.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that. It's a great question. The way it's evolved is we have about 4 people working part or half time on it. And it's become.
Is that a benefit to have more people working on it, maybe different sets of eyes seeing it all from different angles, or?
I believe so, and in my improvement request, I said those people would continue in their roles. So this would be an addition. So it's a big deal. You read about it in the paper almost every day.
The cloud backups is a tertiary disaster recovery option. Would both of the data centers have to go down at the same time in order for this to actually? So how likely of an event is that to occur, that both there at TSI and elsewhere?
I don't know, as Bob Batchelor said here 12 years ago when I presented it, he just said if both of those things happen, we got other problems other than our data, which I disagree with a little bit, but the likelihood, I'd say it's really remote. But is it a possibility? Absolutely. Again, it's an insurance policy. I'm not telling you it's the right. I want you to know about it. Why didn't you tell us about it? Well, I'm telling you about it because if we get hit, if both these facilities get hit.
Well, we hope we don't have a fire in your safe room up there too, but we have fire extinguishers, don't we?
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Is that an annual anticipated cost every year on recurring, or is it a one-time?
That'd be recurring. Great questions.
I think all these improvement requests sound great. No, here's the but. So I think the ones that I think are harder for me are those two, the ones that are the redundancy, if both of those would go down at the same time. And then the cybersecurity analyst, just because I'm not saying they're not important, it's just those are pretty large ticket items to be, and once they start, they'll most likely never stop. All the other ones I can see ultimately supporting.
And that's pretty much the way I presented it to the commission here the last few months. So again, those would probably be towards the bottom of the list as well. But again, I still believe they're important, and that's why they're in front front of this group. Dennis?
It's hard, because you got a commission with 2 representatives from each entity. They have to go back and sell it, because one side may say yes on an improvement, the other side say no, then it's dead. So it's very difficult where they both really got to get together on this to make the whole thing work, because one side kills part of it, the other side kills part of it, and then nothing gets approved. It's very difficult. It's too bad the commission can't, make the decision, but that isn't how it works. They have to go back to the representatives, and that makes it difficult. You got pretty variable ideas on each side.
So you're saying the tertiary disaster recovery and the IT cybersecurity is the 2 you would be leaning towards non-receptive to?
Yeah, just as far as the long term,
No, I get it. I totally get it. You guys only have so many dollars to work with.
And I honestly think those are probably the 2 I was leaning towards as well. I hate to, add anything to the budget that wasn't there the previous year, but on this, if I were the guy on standby, I think I'd probably want that. I don't know. But that's annual for everybody that's on standby. They get it automatically if they're on standby, or only if they're called to do something?
They're automatically, they would get that stipend or that standby pay. So I don't know how to work that otherwise.
$1 something an hour to be available on
Right.
standby.
Right. And there's 2 of them. So invariably something happens, the primary can't answer the secondary. What invariably also happens, somebody else gets called because it's their area of expertise. So.
Well, I'm not necessarily in favor of just picking and choosing. I think our IT department is exemplary, and I don't think that if we just give them 2 small pieces that the rest of it's going to go away. I get that it's a large amount of money, but I still don't, I think I'd rather go at it from the other direction and give them the big ticket items first, and then slowly add in the smaller stuff.
It's another approach.
You like that one better? No,
I like it all. It's just what Dennis is saying is if you cut it here, it's gone. It's not an option. The city could okay it, but
in my mind already, it's not an option, and I'm not saying something's dead before it's began, but in my mind it is on that in this budget cycle. So, and I don't know if that's where you're at on it, but and I can't speak for all 5 of us. I'm just telling you where I'm at.
Yeah, I would prefer that you would receive it and then wait for the city feedback, and then you can always come back and wrap up and do what you plan to do as well. So.
They do have a bigger levying authority than we do, or dollar amount wise. Yeah. I know that $100,000 here is a lot more than $100,000 over there, so that's definitely a difference. Matthew or Marty, any comments? Or?
I'm okay either way. We can wait and see if the city wants to go ahead. I would doubt that, though. So.
I
remain hopeful. So
I remember comments from the city people at the commission saying, "You'll never know unless you ask for it."
Right. So.
Which wasn't.
Again, you guys have veto power at the very end. So.
Sure. Well, in favor of a 15-minute break here, I'd like to move to receive it as is. Then we can.
I'll second that, noting those 2 items consistent with our practice, at least for today, on the improvement request.
All right, motion by Raddick, second by Taylor to receive. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0. So we will
Good questions. Thank you.
recess until 4:30.